This lecture is about naming carboxylic acid derivatives. To name carboxylic acid derivatives, start with the parent carboxylic acid name. For example, if you want to name an acid chloride, an acyclic acid chloride has a suffix YL chloride. If we look at this acid chloride, the parent carboxylic acid is propanoic acid. So this is the parent carboxylic acid, and the name of that acid is propanoic acid, or it is occasionally called propionic acid. So now let's see how we are going to name this acid chloride. This part comes from propanoic acid, and all we've done is we've put a chloride at the end of it. And so we're going to take the parent carboxylic acid name, and it's going to become propanoyl chloride. And so we've put the suffix YL chloride, and all we've done is we've removed the ic acid part. Likewise, if we're working with propionic acid, we can name it as propional chloride. For anhydrides, all we do is we remove the acid and replace it with anhydride. There are two types of anhydride. A symmetric anhydride has two of the same R groups on either side of the anhydride functional group. A mixed anhydride has two different R groups on either side. And so if we were to look at this symmetric anhydride, we count the number of carbons, and we know that it comes from propanoic acid, and it's the same on the other side. And so all we have to do is replace the acid by anhydride. And so the name of this compound is propionic anhydride, or propanoic anhydride. Now when we have a mixed anhydride, we're going to look at both R groups and see which acid they come from. So that side, the left side of the mixed anhydride, comes from propionic acid. The right side comes from butanoic acid, also sometimes called butyric acid. And so when we put both names together, we're going to alphabetize it. And so we can call it butanoic, propanoic anhydride. Again, instead of butanoic, it can be butyric. Instead of propanoic, it can be propionic. When we're looking at esters, a cyclic ester is called a lactone. Now let's just focus on acyclic esters, in which case we're going to end with 8. The first thing we need to do is figure out what our parent carboxylic acid is, and it is, again, propionic acid. And then we need to label our R group, which is isopropyl. You always start with the R group first, that's on the ester. So we start with isopropyl, and then we're going to put the parent carboxylic acid name, which is propanoate. So again, we've replaced the ic acid with 8. When we're naming amides, we're going to follow a similar system. We're looking at the parent carboxylic acid, which again is propionic acid. We're looking at the R group, and sometimes there can be more than one R group on the nitrogen. Again, this is isopropyl. Since this is on a nitrogen and not an oxygen, we're going to precede the isopropyl with an N to indicate that the isopropyl is on the N. So this is N-isopropyl, and the N is always italicized. And in this case, instead of ending with 8, we're going to end with amide. And so the name is propanamide. So the name of this compound is N-isopropyl propanamide. For nitriles, we're going to end with nitrile or O-nitrile. If it's a prefix, then it's going to be cyano. So if we look at this compound again, we're going to count the carbons, and in this case include the carbon that is part of the nitrile. And so we've got 3 carbons. Again, the parent acid is propanoic acid or propionic acid, and we're going to name it propionitrile. It is also known as propane nitrile. When we're trying to name compounds, we also need to keep in mind the functional group priority. Remember that the highest priority is a carboxylic acid, followed by its derivatives, the carbonyls, alcohols, then thiols, amines, ethers, sulfides, followed by alkenes, alkynes, and finally alkyl halides, nitro groups, and alkanes. Now pause the video and provide the IUPAC names for each compound before moving forward. Now let's do a similar analysis for this amide. The highest priority functional group is the amide. We need to look at what the parent carboxylic acid was. It was butanoic acid or butyric acid. We don't have any other substituents on this carbon chain. On the nitrogen of the amide, we do have an R group, and so we're going to say it is a sec butyl group. So we're going to precede the parent name with sec butyl. Since it's on a nitrogen, we're going to put N in front of the sec butyl. We need to italicize both the N and the sec. And to reflect that we have an amide, we're going to cut off the oic acid, and we're going to put amide, or the ic acid here, and put amide. So the names are N-sec-butyl butanamide or N-sec-butyl butyramide. And now finally, let's look at this nitrile. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the parent carboxylic acid was pentanoic acid. We did have a substituent on that acid. We have a 3-fluoro. And since it's not an acid, we're going to rename the end, and we're going to remove the oic acid and replace it with pentane nitrile. And so our compound name is 3-fluoropentane nitrile. Likewise, if we analyze this acid chloride, we're going to name first the parent carboxylic acid, and our parent carboxylic acid is just ethanoic acid or acetic acid. This is an R group, so this is a 2-phenyl ethanoic acid. We're going to change the oic acid part to oil chloride. And so the name is 2-phenyl ethanoyl chloride or 2-phenyl acetyl chloride. Likewise, if we look at this nitrile, the parent name is benzoic acid, and so we have benzonitrile. We have an acid bromide here. In this case, we do need to name each of these branches, and so the name is 2-methoxy 3-methyl butanoyl bromide. Now let's look at these last 3 compounds. For this amide, we have no substitution on the nitrogen, so we just have to name this parent carboxylic acid. We have 4 carbons, and we've got a 2-methyl group. And so this is a 2-methyl butanamide. In the next case, we've got a mixed anhydride. So this part comes from benzoic acid. This part comes from acetic acid or from ethanoic acid. Remember, acetic acid is the common name, and so the names are either acetic benzoic anhydride, or we can put it as benzoic ethanoic anhydride. And remember, for a mixed anhydride, you're always going to alphabetize. And finally, this very simple anhydride, it's one of the simplest anhydrides, and its common name is formic anhydride. It's also known as methanoic anhydride.